based on the season that they had, the whole 1 in 15 situation. All right, let's talk about, as much as I would love to talk about some of the promises, there's not a lot, but there is something to build on. The front seven, of course. Okay, before I talk about really the weakness, which is of course the defense, let's talk about some of the things that could have went right. All right, let's talk about the Browns offense first. All right. First and foremost, um from what was supposed to have been a exciting offensive juggernaut, or at least as Hugh Jackson says, you have to be able to score the football. What was supposed to be a season chock full of that turned into a hodgepodge assortment of chaos and disarray, starting with the offensive line. Now, it wasn't the offensive line's fault that Robert Griffin III got hurt to start the season. It was just a freak play where he was running out of bounds and he got hurt running out of bounds. That's not the offensive line's fault. But the concussions that Cody Kessler suffered during that subsequent uh, situation, as well as the concussions and the injuries that Josh McCown suffered, was indeed the offensive line's fault. And people say that, well, Kessler and McCown held on to the ball too long, and maybe that's because the wide receivers of the Browns weren't up to snuff at the time, because you were missing probably what was the biggest piece of the puzzle in Josh Gordon because of his suspension and then checking himself into rehab as soon as he was coming off of suspension after finding out that a daughter that he fathered with some girl was really his. It threw the offense into disarray. Not to mention that Cam Irving, who was last year's number one pick, he was a first round pick behind Danny Shelton, really cannot play center. And in the last game of the season, they tried him out at right tackle. And for all but, from what we could see, one play where he let the defender get by and Robert Griffin III got creamed on it, he actually held his own at right tackle. But I don't think he is an offensive lineman for the Cleveland Browns. Neither is Pastor. I think those two guys need to not be back to start the 2017 season. So, with free agency looming, I would say that you should use free agency to shore up your offensive line at center and right tackle. Now, you have plenty of guys who can play guard for the Browns and maybe center, but that right tackle position is very key. You need to get that solidified. Of course, I'm going to say what everybody else said. You never should have let Mitchell Schwartz go. That was the beginning of the end concerning the offensive line. But it's whatever. Um, Corey Coleman is not as good as advertised. Of course, he was a mid-round 15th overall number one pick. Can he make plays? Probably. Did he make plays in this offense? No, not really. Outside of the first Ravens game where he scored 2 touchdowns. I think he had uh like 8 catches, 152 yards, 2 touchdowns. But after that, where was he? Where was he? And whether it was attributed to the offensive line or the quarterback play, it doesn't matter. He just no longer produced at a first round draft pick level. Personally, I think he's a slot receiver. I think the Browns over drafted a slot receiver because that's where he was supposed to have lined up with Josh Gordon and Terrell Pryor as the outside receivers. So therefore, of course, he can beat the nickel corner and make spectacular plays, but it didn't work out like that. So plus he broke his hand. So basically, you just had Terrell Pryor out there playing by himself in the wide receiver position as far as pass catchers because Gary Barnidge was quite average. And as much as people want to say, well, he didn't get that many targets. Actually, he did. He just didn't come up with a lot of catches. He was not the Gary Barnidge of 2015. He was the Gary Barnidge of 2014, 13, 12, 11, and 10. He was just average. So we take it to the running back position. The running backs did a solid job. Of course, they didn't run Duke Johnson practically at all out of the backfield. And when they did give the ball to Isaiah Crowell, he only averaged at best 14 carries a game. Even when at 14 carries, he was well over 130 yards rushing. Suddenly, the running game just disappeared in the second half. You saw it in the Steelers game. It emerged itself in the late in the third and fourth quarters, but that was the end of it. When you have your quarterbacks, when you're down to your third string quarterback, one would think that your power running game would be your focus on offense. But that's not what happened. He still continued to average 14 carries a game while trying to throw your way to victories with a defense that is garbage in the back four, in the secondary. So, in all honesty, in the second half, particularly on the defensive side of the ball, you have to blame that on coaching more so than talent. You knew you didn't have the talent by week 4 in the secondary that could help you get a W. So you should have known as a head coach, particularly an offensive genius, as Hugh Jackson is touted to be, you should have known that, hey, I have to control the clock. I need to shorten this game. I need to keep my defense off the field. So let me just run this power running game. I will run it until my running backs are throwing up in the huddle instead of trying to continually throw it on first down, second down, third down, and then maybe you might mix in a run. That was garbage. And don't get me wrong, I like Hugh Jackson, but the scheme of the offense at that point really lost itself. All right. Now, everybody's talking about with the draft that we should draft a quarterback. I say hold off on that. I say rebuild your offensive line first and see just exactly what you can salvage out of RG3. He only played, what, 4.5 games? Really, 4 complete games for as far as snaps go. As the average snaps for a quarterback in the NFL is about 55. So out of what, 5 games, that's what he averaged. So you're looking at really 4 games. Because remember, he was knocked out in the third quarter of the season opener, and then he was knocked out of the game against the Chargers. So you put those two together, that's a full game. Now, he got better following the last month of the season. He got better and better and better, but still, he was still running for his life because of the offensive line. So if you shore up the offensive line and give somebody a chance to throw, time to throw, you might actually get the production that you're looking for. Just like with Cody Kessler. Cody Kessler could move the chains. Again, as I said during the midseason review, that he's the best quarterback I've seen from the line of scrimmage to 20 yards out from the line of scrimmage. He's accurate as he can be, but anything past that, he's questionable. So he is a very serviceable backup if you're running a short passing game. And that's what we saw from him. But the problem was in games that at the midway point where the Browns should have been 5-3, but they lost because of whether it was a missed field goal or several missed field goals or bad officiating, or the defense really just couldn't get a stop because the secondary was garbage, right? Or your quarterback got knocked out of the game in games that he didn't get knocked out of the game. He actually did pretty good. He was very serviceable. So, excuse me, I'm tired. As we focus our attention to the defensive side of the ball, I'm not going to go position by position, but I will go by the positions, period. The Browns need a right defensive end. And Myles Garrett seems to be the perfect choice for that because he can get to the passer. He can cause disruption. The kid can play. He is a very destructive, disruptive force on the defensive line. At linebacker, you're definitely going to need a new inside linebacker. Hopefully, you can re-sign Collins. Also, hopefully, you can re-sign Christian Kirksey. So you're doing okay in that area, especially if you switch to a 4-3 or a nickel. But your secondary needs a complete overhaul. Now, Taylor is a perfect number two, but you don't have a number one because Joe Hayden comes across as a guy who has taken the money and has ran with it. He plays like he's just out there getting a check. We've seen him get when he was out there and not suffering from some type of lazy man's injury like a groin pull, which comes from not working out correctly. When he wasn't suffering from those type of injuries, when he was out there, he was very average and pedestrian. He was more of a liability. He was out there trying to make a way for himself in name only, based on reputation, and he got burned continuously. Brian Body Calhoun, he's a serviceable nickel cornerback, but you don't have a dime cornerback. Well, actually, your dime cornerback is Howard, and that guy, he should have been cut by week 3 because he can't cover. He's a horrible cornerback. Oh my goodness. So, as the season ended, the Browns coaching staff went through some changes. They fired Greg Horton, and deservedly so, because he continually put the defense in bad situations. And with most teams, when you have a bunch of young players, usually by week 8 or 9, you start seeing those guys progress. They start understanding the system and they start playing better. That's not what happened with the Browns. It wasn't until they shifted up the personnel and put in Ed Reynolds Jr. and Kendrick that you actually and bench Joe Hayden and started bringing Body Calhoun in his spot, that you actually did see the Browns secondary start having some sort of production. I mean, of course, they still made excuse me, they still made the same typical mistakes, but that's because of coaching. But now you've gotten rid of that guy. You've gotten rid of Ray Horton, who was actually up for a head coaching job, but not anymore. and you brought in Greg Williams. You also fired your defensive line coach and brought in Clyde Simmons because the defensive line just got average. I mean, how many times do you have to see Danny Shelton push the center all the way back into the backfield and nobody else get any type of penetration whatsoever? Thus making his effort a waste of time. Because once your nose tackle pushes the center 10 yards into the backfield, somebody else should be coming free, running right behind him to destroy the quarterback. Not having your quarterback sidestep the nose tackle and then make a beautiful pass downfield. That should have been pressure. It should have been more pressure than that. Um, so hopefully Clyde Simmons will get the defensive line to play at a superior level. And with Greg Williams coming in, I think it's a great thing because this is this is something that I've noticed for decades, ever since the Browns came back, but it was very telling and it pretty much summed up the Browns in a nutshell. Was when opening day, uh, 2015, when Antonio Brown of the Steelers was returning a punt against the Browns, and he had a big return, and he jumped up in the air and he kicked the punter in the face mask, which caused him to fall. Of course, it was considered a tackle, but it was a very deliberate kick in the face. He jumped up in the air and literally kicked the punter in the face. And what bothered me about that whole play, I mean, of course, the kick bothered me, but what bothered me even more was that the Browns special teamers in their defense just went out, they exchanged each other on the sideline and just went to line up the play when, in all honesty, it should have been a excuse me, it should have been a bench clearing brawl. Your punter, one of your teammates, one of your most vulnerable teammates next to a kicker, just got kicked in the face, and you're not ready to fight. You're not even trying to fight. That can sum up the Browns ever since Bud Carson left. Was that the defense or just the team in general? As much as they want to talk about team camaraderie, excuse me, team camaraderie says that if you kick my punter in the face, everybody on this team is going to stick up for him because that's in the NFL, that's akin to beating a woman. All right? That's akin to beating a woman if you attack the punter or the kicker or you rough the quarterback. How many shots, blindsided and straight on shots, did the Browns quarterbacks take last year? And nobody was ready to fight. Nobody was ready to stick up for that guy and be like, hey, you don't touch him. But somehow I'm supposed to believe that this organization, these guys on this 53 man roster, are playing team football? They won't even stick up for each other. I'm hoping that Greg Williams brings that attitude because if you've watched his defenses throughout the years with the Saints, the Redskins, and the Rams, it's a hard nosed, physical, ball hawking, turnover generating defense. And that's exactly what the Browns need here. They need some. Oh, and also they played with attitude. They had a swagger about them. You didn't take their defenses as being soft. You had to keep your head on the swivel because they were likely to tear it off. That's exactly what the Browns need. They need to have a defense that matches the defensive intensity of the Steelers, Ravens, and Bengals in this division. They're out here ready to write thank you card notes before each game. The freaking Browns defense, they're so weak. And of course, Pep Hamilton left, the so-called offensive coordinator slash quarterbacks coach. He left to go join Michigan, and that's fine. Do what you have to do. Hugh Jackson would rather have a more hands-on approach anyway. So it is what it is. Now, hopefully, because the Browns, somebody else for the Browns was fired today. Somebody from else from the Browns was fired today. I forget who it was. I forget who it was. But they were fired. Let me see. Hold on. Let me see. Hold on. Hold on. Sorry. I'd like to actually get this right here. Wow. Okay. No, that's not going to happen. Okay. Well, I know. Let's see. They fired 5 assistant coaches. Hal Hunter. That's it. Hal Hunter of the offensive line. They fired him today. They also fired Johnny Holland, the inside linebackers coach, and Ryan Slowick, the outside linebackers coach. Louis Siafi, the defensive backs coach, and Cannon Matthews, the assistant defensive backs coach, because these guys couldn't play. Well, they couldn't play, they couldn't coach. If your defense is the weakness, particularly your secondary, and your linebackers are not getting any pass rush, nor is your defensive line, what makes you think you can keep your job? And that's the thing that kills me about the Browns organization and Browns fans. They saw Ray Horton getting fired as a bad thing in replace of Williams. And I'm like, no, you don't get it. That's a great thing. That's a great thing because he's going to bring an attitude and an attack style defense to the Browns in which they need. All right, hold on. I'm gonna put the number here in the chat room. All right, which is 614-769-7465. So now what we're looking at with free agency, they said that the Browns are to extend linebacker Jamie Collins by the weekend, which means that they definitely want to re-sign him, which is smart. Okay. I mean, you definitely have to do that. Uh, the Buffalo Bills are talking about cutting their quarterback, which is crazy. Personally, I say Deshaun Watson is not the quarterback for the Browns. Okay. Um, and overall, I'm just going to wait until free agency until and the draft to see exactly what they do to rebuild this team. So we'll find out because um, Tyrod Taylor, who's the Bills quarterback, who actually based on pro football talks and analysis of him, have him ranked as the second best quarterback in the NFL as far as turnover ratio and completion percentage ratio behind Tom Brady. So we'll find out if the Browns have any interest in him if if he's cut by Buffalo. Okay. All right. So we'll see exactly what happens there. But until then, this is where we are. All right. That's it. I mean, there's no need for me to drag this out. We'll see what happens. I really do believe that Hugh Jackson is following the Bill Walsh plan of success. It's just a matter of making it happen. All right. So this is it. Sante Bay for Raw Dogs Radio. I am out.